All right, everyone. It's hot as heck out here today. Just thought I'd come outside a little bit, talk a little bit about coachability, right? So the ultimate question is how coachable are you? As uh, a coach, as a health coach, working with many critically ill clients, we're all seeking change, right? And one of the ultimate things that's a test not only for the people that I was working with, but for myself as well. That fundamental question of how coachable are you? And so possibly, what if much of this uphill climb that we face in life, it really comes from, leaning on our own understanding instead of God. So that is the fundamental thing we're going to wrestle with today, mainly from Proverbs 3 and John 15. I'm going to weave some scripture in there as well. So I'm Ian, One Heart Steady Flow, and missed last week creating a video, but I'm jumping right back up on this and going to keep doing this just to walk out my own salvation here and keep studying the scripture and applying an understanding in my heart. And so, we're talking about first question. First question is, how teachable are you? And how open are you to being corrected? How willing are you to exchange your understanding for God's? And if we're honest with ourselves, if I'm honest with myself, I have not been very coachable one bit. I've leaned on my own understanding. Proverbs 3, 5 through 6. Trust in the Lord with all of your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to Him, and He will make your paths straight. And boy, that is a tough one. Looking back at all the times that I've fallen off, I've gotten frustrated, I've gotten angry, I've gotten irritable, exhausted. Ultimately, I can always point back to it's kind of this real world thing of leaning on my own understanding and my day-to-day walk in my relationships, whether it be with my wife, at home, in a work environment. I was kind of leaning on this thing of what the human concept is here. It should just be this way, it should be that way, and leaning on that, and ultimately just making things worse for myself. Ultimately, we're in Proverbs 3, there's a call to not resent the rebukement, right? And really the study of this, the resentment, has abounded so much in my life to just correction, right? And kind of that kind of stabbing feeling that I have, and maybe you can resonate with that too, of just feeling this kind of ickiness in my own heart, to having some sort of constructive criticism. Of course, it can shift over into a place of another person's stronghold kind of spilling over into us, and that right there is quite possibly not rooted in wisdom, in the wisdom that comes from heaven, that's pure and peace loving. But it is this knowingness that what is being presented to me is what's being presented to us, and in a lot of instances is healthy. It's love, right? And it comes back to some imitations all throughout Proverbs 3. It's the Proverbs 3 through 4 is let love and faithfulness never leave you. Never leave you. Let love and faithfulness never leave you. And that really is this thing in my life that I haven't really understood. Love. Just kind of like this authentic, genuine love, a love that I've tried to understand. God's love for us is so infinite that it's hard for us to really understand this. The more that we open our hearts, the more that we examine our hearts, the more we can see what offenses that might be there. And everything that I'm saying is all rooted in Scripture. It's all rooted in some kind of wisdom that is laid out in black and white in the text, and it's really a deep study that's needed. Proverbs 3, 1 through 4, it paints this picture of a life that God desires for us. Don't forget my teaching. Guard my commands in your heart. Let love and faithfulness never leave you. And don't despise the Lord's discipline. So, it's something that we all fail at. We all fail at this at times, that we fall back on our understanding of things, and we might not understand that there's that resentment that we feel in our own hearts, that offense that we feel. It is the bait of Satan, right? And it kind of all just falls apart from there. What ultimately are we forgetting? We don't often forget information. We begin, living as though God's truth isn't true. And, instead we rehearse fear, right? I mean, we all can resonate with this. We rehearse shame, we rehearse self-reliance, we rehearse control. And, the important point here is Tony Robbins will say this over and over and over again. Where attention goes, energy flows. And there's something deeply rooted in Scripture in that, because, whatever we rehearse becomes what we remember, right? Whatever we remember becomes what we trust. And then suddenly whatever we trust becomes how we live. And that is such an easy thing to kind of fall into, this trap. So we come back to love and faithfulness, and God calling us to, never let this leave us, right? God is calling us to wear His own character. And in Hebrew, the human language, it falls short sometimes, I think, with our interpretation, specifically love. There's a lot of ambiguity. But in the Hebrew interpretation of it, it's see if I can get this right. It's chesed. It means steadfast love, covenant love, mercy, kindness, compassion, loyal love, unfailing love. Love ultimately, it seeks another person's true good, right? Sometimes love forgives. Sometimes love confronts. Sometimes love waits. Sometimes love carries a cross. And the other, part of this this biblical equation is faithfulness, and it's the Hebrew word for it is emet. It's truth, reliability, steadfastness, trustworthiness, dependability. And it describes something solid enough to lean on. And as human beings, we're always going to fall short. Always. We're always going to fall short. God is the same as He was, He is, and will ever be. And we're trying to form this character. God's trying to mold us like clay into His image. And we're never going to be perfect. But we can embody these things on a daily basis, with just that truth, reliability, and steadfastness, trustworthiness, and dependability. And if we examine these things in our lives, if I examine these things in my life, I have drifted from these things. I've fallen off. I have not been dependable. I have been exhausted, and I have fallen off into my own understanding of things, and really, it turns out in a way where I become kind of paralyzed, just metaphorically. I don't move. Things don't get done. It's a challenging place to sit. Love without faithfulness, it becomes unstable. It's this thing that says, I love you today, until tomorrow becomes difficult. And we all can resonate with this. It's this kind of conditional love that we might play out without really understanding it. Faithfulness without love, it becomes cold duty. Rules remain, but the heart disappears. And what a insightful thing. Essentially what truth can become this thing. Without love, it becomes a weapon. And it produces shame instead of healing. Love without truth, it becomes avoidance. It refuses to speak what leads another towards life. And truth wrapped in love becomes medicine. Jesus never sacrificed one for the other. Um, you know, all these things really tie so wonderfully together because, if we study Matthew 11:29 through 30, we're commanded to take God's yoke upon us and learn from him. He's humble and gentle in heart, and he will give us rest for our souls. And it's these burdens, the visible ones are, grief and illness and financial hardship. And some of the harder ones to really pick out are the ones that are hidden, right? Their need to prove ourselves, living in constant control. And this is the thing, all throughout Scripture is this command, to surrender. And that is a tough one, to just raise our hands and everything looks and feels so real to us in our real world, the opinions and strongholds that everybody else is kind of mirroring to one another. And we try to control outcomes. That's a daily prayer that part of my daily prayer is I release the need to force outcomes, and I receive God's grace to remain faithful through this. And this concept, another thing that we hold is this thing of believing everything depends on us, right? And then finding your identity and performance. I mean, this is hard in our culture because, we're filled with messages of being a doer. The works of our hands, we've got to accomplish, we've got to conquer, we've got to climb. And unfortunately, sometimes we end up climbing on others in order to get to our own platforms. And our identity is rooted in me. And so the call here is to keep being open to be refined in our heart, so that God can mold us into his image, into his identity. It's not rooted in performance. It's presence. It's presence over performance. And this is such a tough one. I call this out many times in these videos, is that I've always wanted to perform. Some brothers from church, we all went down to a downtown area here in Pensacola, and we were just there being present and sharing the word with people, asking if anybody wanted to have us, pray with them. And it was a humbling moment. It was also a moment too where, I examine my own heart and I look at, just how performance driven I have been, even in that moment, is, wanting to be somebody that, just is able to recall scripture in a moment's notice. And I am working on this actively, and I'm working at it in a different way, not to celebrate myself, but be able to connect the dots in scripture, to be able to point back to our real world experiences, to be able to kind of speak the truth. God speak the truth through me, through an open heart. And these unseen, these hidden burdens that we carry, these are often the heaviest ones, and they're the ones that are rooted in decades of our own strongholds and our own patterns. And it's a daily thing, to release these burdens, give them to Jesus, put them at Jesus's feet, and just be coachable, right? Be coachable. That's the point here, is that we're taking a yoke, and a yoke is we are essentially the less experienced barnyard animal, right? That is tethered to a more experienced, more mature animal that kind of knows what it's doing, right? And we have to be willing and open to be able to be yoked, to be able to learn, to be able to have an open heart to learn from God. Jesus never said try harder. He in John 15 he says remain in me, and it's the whole concept of God being the gardener here, and Jesus is the vine and we are the branches. And so we're not producing fruit by the works of our own hands. It's our openness and this knowingness, this open heart, availability, right, to know that we're nothing here without Jesus. We're nothing here without the power of God. God's power is made perfect in our weakness, and we have to be coachable, and we have to be open and available to learn, from the ultimate teacher, from Jesus. And it is not trying harder; it's remaining, being present over performance, and just knowing that we don't produce our own fruits. That is openness of our own hearts that will yield that fruit that ultimately others see. It's the love, the joy, the peace, the kindness, the gentleness, the patience, the self-control. These are the fruits of the Spirit that will begin to manifest as we open our hearts. And so, the branches alone do not strain to produce fruit. And we are rooted in Jesus, and those fruits will materialize. And the whole thing about guarding our hearts is so important. It's called out numerous times. Proverbs, the core message of the channel, Proverbs 4:23, above all else, guard your heart, because everything you do flows from it. And being kind of born in a science kind of mindset, I understand heart rate variability. I understand the concepts of physiology and how the heart is the driver. So communication from the heart to the brain is afferent, 85% afferent. So the majority of the communication is from the heart to the brain. It's not the other way around. The brain is just kind of is replaying things that are stored in its own nervous system components. The hippocampus and the amygdala is really is engaging in these moments where it sees a threat. But the heart is what we have to guard, because even the Hebrews, they understood this. They understood that the heart is the center of thinking, choosing, desiring, believing, acting. God tells us to write His commands in our hearts, because whatever rules the heart eventually directs the life. And so if everything flows from the heart, if 85% of the communication is afferent, flowing upwards towards the brain, how do you think the brain is responding to pride? How do you think the brain is responding to jealousy and to envy and to anger and to bitterness? I mean, we get more of what we focus on. Whatever we're playing in our hearts, the story and the narrative that we're telling in our hearts is guiding the brain. The brain is doing what it does. It's receiving instruction. It's predicting. It has its information. The brilliant thing about the heart is it has its own nervous system. And so some folks even call the brain, or the heart brain, because there's wisdom there. And it's what are we telling? What story are we telling that is overflowing? Essentially in scientific language, I mean, we know this, that measured the heart can be measured up to some 2 feet outside of the body. So other people sense what we hold in our hearts too. And there's a lot of real world examples of this, walking into a room and just feeling a heaviness without anybody even saying a word. You feel it. And there's a heart rate variability experiment that was done. And so heart rate variability is something I'll go into later in the future. But it is a measurement of the balance of the nervous system, of overall health, really. At any one point in time, we might be in the sympathetic dominance where we're just in this fight or flight, or we may be kind of in a fawn state, where we're just succumbing to things, and maybe we're very, very low. So the heart rate variability is a measurement of resilience, as a measurement of health and wellness. And so we ideally would want this kind of in balance. But in a lot of cases in our real world, it's not, because we haven't trained our hearts to really be spilling out a good quality wisdom that comes from heaven. It's pure, it's peace-loving, it's submissive, it's considerate, it's full of mercy and good fruit, and it's sincere and impartial. And the whole goal here is to be a peacemaker, to sow in peace, so that we reap that harvest of righteousness. Because if we're doing anything else than this, we're gonna spill hate into the world. We're gonna uh, we're going to go so far away from love that begins us to wonder why, right? Why our lives are kind of in shambles, or why other people respond the way they do to us. But going back to this, there was an experiment, heart rate variability experiment, and it was from the creators of HeartMath, and it was the guy's son and his dog, and it just kind of gives an example of how we mimic each other and how we kind of our patterns kind of just mesh together. And so when the dog and the boy are really close together, heart rate variability is high, which means there's kind of a wellness there, right? And when the dog leaves the room, the measurements change. There's maybe some despair and some sadness there. And so the heart rate variability measurement, the output starts to lessen. And then when they're brought together again, it increases. So it was a really good real world example of how even an animal's heart can impact us and us them. I mean, it's really embodies this thing of guarding our hearts. It's more than just a organ that's just pumping blood, right? There's a lot going on in the heart, a lot of things that we don't understand, and that's why it's referenced over 800 times in the Bible, is because the heart is so centric. And in ancient culture, they knew this, that it's the thinking center, choosing, desiring, believing, acting, and that's why it's called out to guard it above all else. So the question is not simply, what do you believe? The deeper question is, what are you rehearsing every day? What are you rehearsing every day? Are you wanting to win? Are you wanting to win arguments? Or, are we being peacemakers? Being a peacemaker doesn't mean that we raise the white flag and we have no boundaries and we let people, roll over us. It's love. Even love can apply good, healthy boundaries. It's that rebuking thing. I study this too, and have wondered this quite often, that, maybe in my life, God has really been trying to be gentle with me and to rebuke me, but in my very fragile heart state, my very hardened heart state, I have been unable to receive that rebuking, right? I've been able to receive it. And, so I'm pretty much shut down. I'm shut down from that download from God, and my life plays out with a me approach, with a striver approach, with things other than love. And the final thought here today, something that I've heard quite often is, in order to be a good leader, you need to be a good follower. And so, who are we following? Is it some fake news masking as wisdom, that we're following? Is it the truth in the Bible? Are we coming back to the precepts? Are we coming back to the commands? Are we storing the commands in our hearts? Will you follow fear or will you follow faith? Control or surrender? And it comes back to many things in Proverbs 3. Not relying on our own understanding, not letting faith and faithfulness and love leave us. Not let it leave us. Capturing what it means to really love and really to be faithful, and always testing our hearts each and every day, to know that what we hold there will replay. And do we want to be replaying loving things, peaceful things, the wisdom that comes from heaven? Do we want to be replaying that in our hearts and letting that dominate in our bodies? Or do we want to go off on our own and try to lean on our own understanding over and over and over again, and essentially get mirrored back to us really what we're trying to avoid in the first place? I think all of us want peace at the end of the day, and it's this lasting peace that's promised in Matthew 11, 29 through 30. It's rest for our souls. Give our burdens to Jesus, knowingly, willingly, openly. Just know that we have to be coachable. At the end of the day, we have to be able to be taught and have an open heart to be submissive, to know that we don't know everything and we're never going to. So that is the message for today. I just thank you for tuning in here today, and wherever you're at, whatever you're going through, whatever trials you're facing, I pray for for some sort of heavenly wisdom, in those moments, to know that there is some kind of purpose in the pain. As hard as it is, it's never fun to go through pain, but we can look back in the future and look back at some of these painful points as some of the lowest points is where God finds us, and God is near the brokenhearted. So that's it for today, and just keep on keeping on. Prayers to you. Just surrender, daily surrender, opening your heart, guard your heart, love and faithfulness. Never let it leave you. And that's it for today. So, all right, everyone, God bless you, and we'll see you next week.